I think probably we should go ahead and get started. Okay. Phyllis is not with us tonight. She's celebrating grandson David's fourth birthday.
Happy birthday to grandson.
I will send the word on after service. So, the reading from Emmett Fox for 27 July is titled Clarity and Interest. And Fox writes, the key to life is to build in the mental equivalence of what you want and to expunge the equivalence of what you do not want. You build in the mental equivalence by thinking with clearness and definiteness and interest. Remember, clarity and interest, these are the two poles. If you want to be healthy, happy, prosperous, doing constructive work, having a continuous understanding of God, you think, feel, and get interested in those ends. What we call feeling in connection with thought is really interest. 99 times in 100, the reason why Christians do not demonstrate meaning bring about what they seek, is that they lack feeling in their desires or prayers. How are you going to expunge the wrong mental equivalence? Suppose you have a mental equivalent of resentment or of unemployment or of criticism or of not understanding God. The only way to expunge a wrong mental equivalent is to supply the opposite. The right thought automatically expunges the wrong thought. If you say, I am not going to think of resentment anymore, what are you thinking about except resentment? The key to the management of your thinking, and therefore the key to the management of your destiny, is to substitute an affirmative thought for the negative thought. And then the quote from Psalm 138, the Lord will perfect that which concerneth me. Now the Lambsa version of that same verse is way different. O Lord, rest thy right hand upon me, thy mercy. Oh, I'm sorry, I shut it off too soon. O Lord, rest thy right hand upon me, thy mercy, O Lord, endures forever. So, a very different translation there. And I did check another old King James version, and what Fox was quoting is King James. Okay, so today we're dealing with life's big and small deaths and what to do with them. You know, when we think about death, we tend to think about the cessation of being in the physical body, whether ours or someone we care about or someone we don't care about. Research shows that there are a number of life experiences which have, I'll say, cataclysmic effect on our physical well-being, similar to having had a partner die or a child die or a relative die. There's major life changes. There's marriage, believe it or not. Divorce, less surprising. Loss of a job or getting a new job, starting a new job. The end of a long friendship or romance, and even a major physical move of where your home is or your residence is. I owe and want to give credit to my colleague Megan. Credit to this conversation, as with the last one, comes from a conversation she and I had about deaths. And she referenced that there are smaller deaths, which sort of got me thinking this way. And doing some research online, I came across a discussion of little deaths. Daniel Murphy Kennedy, whom I do not know aside from being a prognosticator, the idea of little deaths is simple yet profound. They are events, losses, or circumstances that cause feelings of sadness and pain, much like those experienced when an actual death has occurred. And then he lists things such as giving up the myths and innocence of childhood. And I'm taking it a bit further. Smaller deaths that I find myself thinking about. When we move in life from being students at whatever level to taking on adult responsibilities, that's a little death, the death of what we were. When we realize that Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny aren't real, that's a little death. When we realize that our parents aren't perfect, that's a little death. When we take on the responsibility to parent and raise a child versus having been carefree, or when we take on the responsibility for a pet, never having had one before or not having had one before, it's a major life change. It's a little death. When a dream we've been carrying for our lives or for something where we have the desire, the enthusiasm, and it's crushed or becomes impossible, that's a little death. And talking about that, I'm reminded of a fellow I had a tangential acquaintanceship with, who tried out and was accepted for professional football. And the first scrimmage in the practice season before his first professional game, he was hit wrong, smashed up his ankle to the point that he has dozens of pins in it, completely, never again. And I knew him maybe 20 years later. He still hadn't gotten over the grieving and the wishing for what could have been. He hadn't gotten over that little death. And then, of course, for those of us who have some experience on this body, there's a little death every time we discover it can't do what it used to. Or we don't look like we used to 10 or 20 years ago. In my case, I figure all the wrinkles show that maybe I'm a little wiser. But so then, as I was thinking farther about it, I realized one of the most earth-shaking little deaths is when you realize that you're not who you thought you were, or that you've been putting on the act, putting on the dog of who you were, and you realize you're not. I'm remembering a conversation I had with a fellow who had not been, shall we say, upholding his marriage vows very well. And he told me that one day he was shaving and he looked himself in the mirror and he didn't like the person he saw looking back at him. And he vowed at that point that he was going to be someone he could feel good about looking at. So he experienced a little death. Now, what are you going to do with that little death, of course, as well as the big deaths? Well, actually, I should mention something I've been thinking about for myself. in you may or may not know I had a pretty horrendous childhood, and I continue my healing. I work with some of the people I've trained in lift, and we trade off. And I've been recently experiencing something I've not before. Looking out the window, I might see a father walking hand in hand with a son or a daughter, or helping them adjust their hat or something. And I realize I never experienced that. Or I see an older parent supporting, sharing with a teenager or adult child, and I realize I never had that. And I get, I'll call them spasms of grief for what I did not have, to say nothing of the fact I never had a child of my own and didn't have the opportunity to try that experience from the other side either. So those are griefs, those are little deaths as well, awareness of little deaths that I have to deal with. So I came across an article, 5 Ways to Deal with the Thousands of Little Deaths We All Go Through, that had some good ideas. And the note was, we're all aware that a physical death of someone we cared about, or an animal we cared about, leaves a big hole, leaves a lot of emotion to be dealt with. But the author here makes the point that small deaths, small changes in our lives can leave small holes or bigger holes as well. And sometimes a small death now triggers the grief from a long ago small or large death, so that because we haven't resolved it, it's still locked up in us. And that's, of course, one of the things that Lift helps people get past. But here are the 5 concepts that this author provided. 1, expect deaths. Not because you're wanting it, but because life brings them. You love the pet today. Unless it's a parrot, the chances are this pet that you love will predecease you and you will have grief. But it's better to be aware that this is part of life than to pretend everything's fine and then get knocked gobsmacked when it happens. It helps us also remember that life is uncertain. The only thing, well, the old joke, there's no guarantee but of anything except death and taxes. And, with the current administration, I'm not so sure about taxes if you're wealthy. Joke, I'm not trying to be political here. So expect changes, some of which will feel like little deaths. And, of course, there are some changes we want if we're stuck in a really bad job. Even if we finally get another one, there's still the shift and the little death there. Second is, when the deaths come, accept the deaths. I know someone whose husband died. I think it's going on 30 years now. And she still, well, like Queen Victoria, she still grieves every day. She has not let him die. Now, from our standpoint, that's not healthy for us. But the other part is, if we're still hanging on to the person, the spirit, the animal, are we not perhaps handicapping them in their journey on the other side? So we need to be cognizant of that. It's healthier to let things die. Friendships run a natural course. Some of them run a long time. Recently in the agony columns, there have been 3 or 4 writers writing in about a friend, best friend for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and suddenly there's no communication. Or suddenly the friend has exploded in anger, or there's been a rupture. And so they're grieving. What do I do with it? Do I try to get them back? Which would be hanging on. So within life, allow for the fact that there is an ebb and flow. Some things come in, and there will be a time when it's time to exit. Just as for our own lives, our own body, as Emmett Fox says, we'll be coming into this body. We will also be exiting this body at some point. The third point of this author is give things away. Allow the change. And that can be even as much as give away things that physical things that you're holding on to that may be past their value to you. That's something I need to give some more thought to myself. If we refuse to let go, the harder it is, the harder the experience of that death, little or big, is. And the harder it is also for us to adjust our life appropriately. Her fourth point is hold the things you care about loosely. Allow for shifts, because there is the ebb and flow. And if we allow for shifting, then the little deaths will not be quite so gobsmacking, quite so upsetting. And if we hold loosely, there's room for adjustment. So in some cases, we may not need to see a cessation, but just a realignment. There may be a little death in there, but it's not the same as and gone. And certainly, again, talking about the agony columns, parents write in or kids write in where the issue is the parent's been holding on real tight, trying to control, etc., and the kid's going, hell no, out of here. Or the kid's writing in, my parent micromanages me even though I'm 30 years old, how do I get her to stop? Sort of thing. Holding on too tight causes us more trouble and increases not only the severity of the experience of death, but the likelihood of it. This is a nice quote from the author. Don't grab hold and claim complete ownership of children, of money, of beauty, of your job. Keep an open hand. We can still love strong, but hold on loosely. After all, we're just temporary stewards of God's good gifts. We are not permanent, entitled owners. And it's a lot healthier to pass through the world this way. And then, number 5 is, be willing to start over. Whatever loss we've had, allow the grief, give it holy time, but allow yourself to start over. Again, referring to agony columns, people who have moved but have failed to create new connections in the community where they are. All the connections are still back where they no longer are. Or they've lost this job and no other job is good enough. as examples. One authority says the healing is in the return. We can and should learn how to start over. We should do it with compassion for ourselves and for the others who are affected. Less judging, less harsh treatment, that's not ours to do anything with. But we need to be aware that with every death, large or small, we need to make course correction. We need to make adjustments for the new reality, the new existence we are in. And this will happen again and again and again in this lifetime. And I presume on the other side too. So Richard Rohr talks about this as going through resurrection, bringing ourselves back to life after the loss. And we have to be ready and willing to release that which has died, that which is gone, as a preparation to receive what is new that is going to come in to our lives. If we're holding on here, there's no room for the new to come in. And then Richard Rohr makes the point, somehow God is with us as we go through each individual death. And God is with us as we work to create, work to create the new life that will follow. Love is always stronger than death, he says. Love is forever. And he makes the point that all spirituality addresses, one way or another, what we need to do with the pain of our loss, of our little deaths. To be human is to know loss in many forms. And because we're human, our hearts can break. Because we're human, we can understand that loss is a universal language. We all go through it. All of humanity goes through grief. All of us have broken relationships, unrealized possibilities. All of us have bodies that don't do what they used to. And though our experience of grief is personal, it is good to remember that everyone on this plane grieves. And an important point, and I don't remember where I picked this up, is, it was another Richard Rohr article, noting that one of our tendencies to overlook, people understand when you're going through a big loss that you're grieving. There's funerals, there's recognitions one way or another, but our little deaths, people tend not to see, even we ourselves tend not to give funerals for a little death, or a ritual for the little death, or a ritual for a cat who's curious about what we're doing. So even though officially we don't get funerals for our little deaths, it doesn't hurt for us to acknowledge it, to do our own ritual, our own ceremony, to acknowledge the loss, to acknowledge whatever level of grief, of devastation, because that will help us move along when we face a dark time or dark days or being gobsmacked by something we didn't expect. And I've been thinking, this is a sort of side note, it's been a couple of years since we did a ceremony to honor those who came before us, our ancestors, who gave us the foundation on which we have built. So you might begin thinking, who would you care to share as an ancestor? Because I think sometime maybe in August or September, that will be our service, where everyone can share an ancestor or ancestors who have helped us be who we are. And then here's a wonderful quote heading toward the conclusion. All changes, even the most longed for, have their melancholy, for what we leave behind us is a part of ourselves. And we must die to that part of our life before we can enter the next. We must let go of who we thought we were, assess what we learned or thought we learned, let ourselves transition to who we are and who we are becoming. And then I was talking with the guy who came out to quote us on repairing our concrete porch, and he was talking about a revelation he had that I think is appropriate as a close here. He said, you know, when you're going through a rough time, it was perhaps like riding in the boat in the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus is in the back, and here you are in the front, and the wind and the waves, and you're getting drenched. It's easy to forget that God, Jesus, was in the back by the tiller, and he was the one steering. And in our grief, in our sense of loss, it's worth remembering that the divine's is sitting there behind us with the tiller while we're riding up front. And that, my friends, is what I have to say today. Anything anyone cares to share? Yes, Lori R.
Okay, sorry about the video there. Thank you, Brian. That's such an important topic. And when I did a lot of counseling, I think this is a topic that I addressed a lot more than I really expected to. I think more so in the little deaths. Everybody looks at it as a normal thing to grieve the big losses. But when it comes to some of those smaller things, they forget that they're just as important because it's important to you as an individual. And a lot of times, especially people that their marriage has ended, their relationships have ended, a lot of them in counseling have to go through a grieving process, and they find that odd to hear that they need to grieve over something like that. I said, you need to grieve over that just like you would grieve over the death of a loved one. It's just as important because it's just as important to you. And I'll often have them too. You mentioned the ceremonies. That's a wonderful thing to do. I also had them write a letter to their spouse when they ended a marriage or things ended the way they didn't want it to. They tried to repair things and couldn't. I'd often tell them, write them a letter and tell them what you're sorry for, what you wished you had changed. And occasionally I'll tell them, now pray about whether to give that to them or not, if there's any hope left for a reconciliation. And many times, if not, I'll tell them to get a bowl, put that letter in that bowl, light it, and let the ashes you watch it while it completely burns to ashes. I said, take that out and bury it in your yard, in your flower bed, and somewhere. And I said, that is your last step in closure for you for whatever particular thing they were grieving. So thank you for bringing those up. That's so important. And that process can completely turn somebody's life around. So thanks for sharing that those smaller things are also just as important to grieve through.
Thank you, and thank you for what you just shared. Ellie, I believe you asked what the verse was. It was Psalms 138, verse 8, first part. Somebody else with something to share. Yes, Ellie.
Um, as Lori R said, I'm not going to repeat what she said, but my words, we often have the same thoughts anyway. Thank you for sharing that. What a couple of the things that I wrote down for, the little deaths is, as you were, saying the lists, was, not who we no longer are. Because, when there's an illness or an invisible illness or something that happens, it changes the person, and, I mean, I am living that, and I'm sure others are too, with strokes or traumatic brain injuries or, grieving, or what have you, that changes someone. They remember who they used to be, or they can't do what they used to be able to do, or whatever. But one of the things that came to mind, and Lori R. and I have talked about this, is religious beliefs or belief systems shattered. They weren't what you thought they were before. And so you've got to go through your own transformation and your own growth period, for that loss or grievance, because you may grow up with a whole belief system. And then as you get older, you're like, wait a minute, that's not what scripture says. So, that's what came to mind as you were sharing. Uh, and then when you said, the transition, or as I like to say, the transformation of who we are, of who we're becoming. Um, that just kind of, I don't know. It in Judaism, in the Kabbalah, they talk a lot about the transformation or the lights of Kabbalah. I mean, there's a whole, I don't know, I could go on for days about that, but I won't. There's a whole lot there. Um, and um, with those that do tarot, or even oracle, you start as the fool or the new beginnings. And the whole major arcana is your journey through life. So, I mean, everything's connected. Anyway, thank you for your talk, Brian. Again, um, timing, and you were mentioning, ceremonies. Again, a good idea. Um, um, with ancestors during the wheel of the year, the best time for, to hear ancestors is during Samhain, during October. That's when the veil's the thinnest, and when the ancestors have, um, the, when they can come over the easiest. I didn't know if you knew that or not. Um,
Nope. Sounds like
anyway,
this is
maybe,
an October event then.
yes, end of
Okay.
October.
I
Um,
will I will find a time when I'm not doing a show, a weekend in October, and I'll announce it well in advance so people can be thinking about it. Thank you.
and before we do prayers, um, as a flash paper, if y'all could really keep Donovan in prayers. due to a very stressful situation, he's been having seizures again 3 to 4 times a day. It's an outside stress situation, and it's really affecting him. I mean, you can tell it's affecting me, but it's really affecting him. So if you all could, say prayers, light a candle, you know, or whatever, whatever you do, uh, um, it'd be much appreciated. And Loriara, when you had mentioned about the burning of the letter, that's actually one of the things in many of the pagan and witchcraft ceremonies that people do for cleansing rituals too. I didn't know if you knew that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, and I will, uh, with your approval, go ahead and ask all of the people on our list to be doing some extra special prayer for Donovan. Okay, anyone else with a contribution? Okay, let's move on to our silence then and see what the divine has to tell each of us. Let us do a benediction. Father, we thank you for watching over us, for continuing to help us find good in our lives and create good for others. Help us to serve your love. Help us to love better. Help us to receive your love and the love of others more easily into our beings. Help us to lift this world up as we walk through it. Help us to lift ourselves to a higher plane. We thank you for all the good you've rained down upon us and that you will be raining upon us this week. We thank you for your good guidance and for your love. We say thank you, thank you, thank you, and amen. We'll see you all next week. I will get an email out on behalf of Donovan. And everyone, go bless others and be blessed yourselves. Bye-bye for now.